Here we are at an organic high CBD hemp production and research space. And so behind me we have drip irrigation on certified organic land and growing these relatively small plants, and they will get quite a bit larger by the end of the season, about 3 feet by 3 feet by about 3 feet or so. And these are female organic hemp clones that are being grown for CBD oil, which is a pretty popular product on the market right now. And a lot of our Colorado growers are very interested in expanding maybe what they're doing currently with a vegetable crop and some of the technologies that we would use to produce a vegetable crop, like drip irrigation, to grow a very similar crop, at least in the way that it is laid out in a field, and that's a high CBD hemp crop. There's, in addition to interest in high CBD hemp in Colorado, there's a lot of interest in certified organic products as well. And since this crop really hasn't been researched in any sort of comprehensive way for the better part of 70 years, there are huge knowledge gaps in terms of not only how to produce the crop in general, but then also how to specifically produce an organic crop. So very basic crop information, like spacing and how much irrigation they should receive, are some basic questions that are still being addressed because of that knowledge gap and that research gap. But the project behind me that you see here is an organic fertility management study. And so we are applying different types of organic fertilizer that's allowed in organic systems. Everything from a blood meal to a composite meal and even a chicken fertilizer are being evaluated at different rates and different timings to be able to provide recommendations for organic management of a high CBD hemp crop. I'm now standing in front of a hemp crop, an organic hemp crop that's being grown for both seed and fiber. And we call that a dual purpose crop, to grow a single crop for both fiber production as well as possibly seed production. And this, unlike high CBD hemp, is a mixture of both male and female plants. And for the purposes of this discussion, we'll keep it just that simple for now. And so right in front of me, I have a female plant which has pollinated flowers, and it's starting to develop seed, which is the grain that we could harvest from this hemp crop. And then also mixed into the stand is a male plant and the male flowers. There's a little bit of a difference in color and kind of the height of the plant. This one's starting to go downhill at this point and starting to turn yellow because the male flowers have mostly opened and done their job and pollinated the female flowers. And these could be harvested for fiber as well. So we have a mixture of both male and female plants in this seed or grain and fiber dual purpose hemp crop. The other big difference that you'll notice between this crop and a high CBD crop is the spacing, both between individual plants in a row and then from row to row. Just a couple of inches between individual plants in both of those directions is pretty characteristic of a dual purpose crop, in this case for seed and for fiber. I'm holding a male hemp plant with its male flowers producing pollen in my right hand here, and you can see that that's mixed in this dual purpose crop with female plants. And so this is a female hemp crop, dual purpose. And by dual purpose, I mean that it produces a seed crop, and that's what the female plants are doing. The pollinated flowers will develop a seed or a grain crop. And both the male and the female plants can be harvested for their main stems where the fibers lie. And so hemp can be produced for fiber purposes as well. And if you do both, then it's called or considered to be a dual purpose crop. So this is a high CBD hemp pollen exclusion project. And so I'll give an explanation of a few things before I go into more depth on the project. But inside these small tents are high CBD hemp plants like the ones that you see here. And we have a temperature monitor also in the field located here. But the reason we put a tent over these plants and those plants over there is because these are female hemp plants and they're clones. There are two cultivars represented here, Wife and Uno. And we're interested in, if you're growing female hemp plants for high CBD production, generally speaking, pollination is a negative thing. And so if your neighbors, for example, are growing male hemp plants like the plants in the background here, they're producing large amounts of pollen, and that pollen can travel 2 miles or more in all different directions, but mostly traveling with the wind. And so that's a really big challenge for a very high value crop like high CBD hemp, and trying to protect it, especially if you have neighbors or even far away neighbors up to several miles away producing male plants, and that pollen is considered to be a negative thing. So the immediate question that came up shortly after hemp production became very popular in Colorado and began to grow was, how do I protect my female plants from being pollinated by male plants that might be nearby? And so we took the same concept that a lot of vegetable growers use, which is low tunnel structures like the ones that you see here, and the different types of fabrics and materials that a small vegetable grower or even a large scale grower would have on hand. And those are materials like this insect netting here that has a pretty large pore size, a thin row cover material or rime, like the one that you see here, and then there's a thick rime material, much more like a frost or a freeze blanket toward the back. And each of those have varying sizes of pores that might be able to keep pollen out. They might be small enough to keep pollen out. We've looked at hemp pollen under a microscope, and it seems like pollen might be able to get through the pores in this insect netting. And sure enough, our results have shown that pollen does get through, but a little less than the wide open plants here. And the two most successful materials in terms of reducing the amount of pollen getting into the plants, and then the amount of pollination and seed production, which again is an undesirable thing, was this thin row cover material and the thick row cover material. Those have been our two best candidates for this ongoing project. This is year 2 to confirm those results, but we're seeing some really positive pollen exclusion results from this project so far with that thin row cover and this thicker row cover material. So we're about the middle of the growing season here with these clones that were rooted cuttings of high CBD hemp plants. Again, this is in a certified organic production system, but the pollen exclusion would work whether you're a conventional or an organic grower. And again, these are female plants, and it's desirable to have those female clones out in the field with this wide spacing. And it's about mid-season right now. By the time the end of the season occurs, these will have both merged with each other and they will be touching each other. So the plants will be pretty good sized, and that's what's harvested at the end of the season. So these are female clones of high CBD hemp plants, and I know that because I purchased a female clone, and so I would expect to get a female plant from that, and I did. And the way I can tell that is I can look at these flowers that are developing here. These are the female flowers, and there are no male flowers developing on this plant at all. It'll stay female, it should stay female its entire life. And so since these are not being covered by any sort of pollen exclusion material, and those are fertile flowers, and there is definitely male pollen in the air, I expect a seed to develop inside of that floral structure there. And generally, if the plant is putting energy into seed production, it's likely taking energy and resources away from CBD oil, which is what is the desirable product at the end of the season. Those are individual female flowers, and as I mentioned, this is kind of mid-season. As the plants develop, they will develop large clusters of those female flowers, and that is what is generally harvested as the primary product for high CBD production. But the leaves, the petioles are also included generally in that extraction process. The large, woody, thick stems are removed before processing generally. There's a lot of interest and buzz around production of hemp in Colorado. And one of the first questions that we usually get asked is, what type of hemp do you plan to grow? And so I'd like to point out some important differences between high CBD hemp, like the plants growing in front of me, and a hemp crop that you're growing for seed or for fiber. They look very different from each other in terms of their production system, even though up close, when you look at an individual leaf, you may not be able to tell that much of a difference. So a few of the key differences that I'd like to point out here is that these are high CBD female clones, and they're for specifically high CBD production. They're planted at about a 3-foot spacing from each other to give plenty of room for them to eventually merge together by the end of the growing season. And again, they're all female plants because that's the desirable sex for production of high CBD oil.